Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Samich Beis Amud Aleph, starting with the Samich Aleph Amud Beis, 6 lines from the bottom. Our Gemara brought the following question: when a person is shoichet a korban Pesach for those who are circumcised, and he then has intention that he'll be zorek the dam for those who are not circumcised, that they will fulfill their obligation of korban Pesach. Is that valid or not? It's a machlokes. Rabbah is the opinion that it's kosher, and he learns from the Pasuk, it says v'chol orel, all of the orel, meaning to say that when you're shoichet for only mitzas orel, it's kosher. Kol orelim, then it's posel. Then the Pasuk says v'zois chukas ha-pesach, to teach me this is only true when it comes to shchita. But when it comes to zerika, afilu kula, even if it's entirely intended for those who are arelim, it is still valid. Rav Chizda argues on Rabbah, and Rav Chizda says that it's possible. And he learns like this. It says, again, v'kol orel, teaching me that when you do for mitzas arelim, it is kosher. Only when you do for all, when you're sheichet for all arelim, is it going to be possible. Then he says, v'zois teaches me l'chumra, dahainu, that when it comes to zrikas hadam, then even mitzas for the arelim will poistil the korban Pesach. So again, Rabbah says lekula, that for zrikas hadam, when the intention for zrikas hadam, then even kula would be then permissible, it will not be poistil. Whereas Rav Chizda says l'chumra, that even when it's mitzas, it will be then poistil, if the zrika will be poistil for the mitzas of the arelim. The Gemara now asks the question on both Rabbah and Rav Chizda. Maskif lo Rav Ashi. He asks from the following: Mimai dahai v'kol orel kula mashma. How do you know to learn that the word v'kol orel in the pasuk refers to the entire arelim that he has intended for, whereby each one has their understanding? Dilma hai v'kol orel. Maybe when it says v'kol orel, mashma kol dehu orla. Maybe it means any. Kol in this case would mean any, meaning even mitzas orla. And therefore, kasav rachmana v'zois. When the Brisa brings the words v'zois chukas ha-pesach, it means an exclusion to say da'ad di'ika kula orla loy pasla. If it's only mitzas, then it won't be pasul until it's kula orla for all the arelim. Then it will be pasul. Loishna b'shchita v'loish b'zrika, and we don't make a distinction between if it's for shchita or if it's for the zrika. In other words, it will be a kasha on both Rabbah and Rav Yosef and Rav Chizda. Rabbah, because Rabbah said when it comes to zrika, then lekula afilu kol arelim, it will be kosher. And over here we're saying that if it's going to be kol, it will be poisel. And according to Rav Chizda, who goes lechumra and says that even mitzas lezrika for arelim is going to be poisel, here we're saying that it's only going to be kol, but if it's mitzas, then it's not. That's Rav Ashi's kasha on both Rabbah and Rav Yosef, the way they learn v'kol orel. He has another pshat. What is the machlokes? Eloma Rav Ashi, rather what Rav Chizda and Rabbah are arguing is as follows. Rav Chizda and Rabbah behai kamiflik. They're arguing about the following. Now it's a whole different understanding of what we thought until now. He's going to explain that they're talking about a machlokes when you have shinui bailim, when you intend for a different bailim, as follows. We're on top of Samach Beis Amud Aleph. It says in the pasuk, "V'nirtza loy lechaper alov." V'nirtza loy lechaper alov means that when there's zorek the dam, it'll be nirtza, it'll be appeased for the one to get an atonement for him, meaning for the bailim, for the owner. Alov v'loy al chaver. For the bailim, we'll get then the atonement for the zrikas hadam, but not for his chaver, not for his fellow man. Rabbah understands chavero dum yedidei, that his chaver that does not get the atonement when he sprinkles it, it has to be similar to him. Mahu dibar kaporo. Af chavero debar kaporo. Just as he is a bar kaporo, the one who's sprinkling the blood he's the bailim, he's the bar kapora. So too, his chaver, who's going to then be excluded, has to be also somebody who's a bar kapora. And therefore, in such a case of shinoi bailim, he'll then not be able to be zoiche to the kapora because he is chayiv in such a carbon. La'apuke hai orel de la'av bar kaporo, to exclude an orel who is not somebody who can bring such a carbon. He's excluded from the carbon Pesach. So therefore, if you have intention for the orel, then it's not going to affect the carbon. The carbon will still be a kosher carbon. V'Rav Chisda learns, hi orel nami. Even oral is excluded when it says alov v'loy al chaveroi. It's referring to even the oral who is being excluded, because kiven de bar chiyuvahu, since he says the oral is true currently, he is excluded, meaning he is precluded from bringing a korban pesach. You see, he is an oral, he's uncircumcised, but since he could become circumcised, hu bar kaporu hoyel di boy misakin nafshe. Since he could go ahead and get himself a circumcision, therefore he would be a bar kapara. Even now we consider to be a bar kapara, whereby if you have intention for the oral, then it's going to be posel. And that's what Rabbah says, it's a shinui bailim. So in other words, we have to emphasize over here that Rav Ashi is explaining an entirely different way of we explained the original question. The original question we said was a person shoichet for a carbon Pesach for those who are circumcised, and he is intentioned to then zorek the dam for those who are not circumcised. But now Rav Ashi is learning that it's a different type of machlokes. Here the machlokes is a whole different subject. It's the subject of shinui bailin. When a person then has shinui bailin for the arelim, because over here we're talking about they were not included in the chabura, they're not a shinui bailim. When his intention for the arelim, does that passel the korban pesach or not? According to Rabbah, it does not passel, it's still a kosher pesach. But according to Rav Chisda, since we say hoyel, since he could become a person who is circumcised, therefore it will, yes, poisel such a carbon, since he has intention for the arelim. The Gemara now questions Rav Chisda, who says that the concept of hoyel makes him have a bar kapora here, since he could become circumcised. Ask the Gemara, mi islay le Rav Chisda hoyel? Does Rav Chisda indeed hold of the concept of hoyel? Behold, itmar, we learned earlier, ha'oife mi yomtiv lechol, one who is baking from yomtiv to chol. It's in the afternoon of the Suda of Yomtiv, and now he starts baking. So the din is like this: Rav Chisda Omar Loike, he gets malchus because he's now being oife, doing a malacha on yontif for chol. You're not allowed to then bake or cook, for that matter, for chol. You can only bake on yontif for yontif. So he gets malchus for doing malacha. Rabba Omar Eino Loike. Rabba says he does not get malchus. Says the more to explain. Rabba Omar Eino Loike because I'm reading hoyel. Rabbah's understanding is the reason why he does not get malchus is because we do say hoya. We say since if orachim were to come, he could go ahead and feed them fresh bread or cakes that he just baked. Therefore, even now when he bakes, we'll say the concept of hoyel, and it's valid. Whereby he does not get malchus. Rav Chisda Omar Loike. Rav Chisda, however, does say he gets malchus because lo yamrin hoyel. We do not say hoyel. So we see, we see that over here in our case, we're suggesting that Rav Chisda holds of hoyel. Yet that contradicts what he says over there in regards to cooking or baking from yontif to chol. So Gemara asks this question: Bishlama de Rabba lokasha. It's very well according to Rabba. On Rabba, it's not a kasha. That Rabba over there, Gabe baking on Yantif, there he says hoyel, and over here he doesn't say hoyel because hacha mechusar meiser. Hasam deloy mechusar ma'isa. Over there, over here, start with over here. Over here, it's lacking a ma'isa. That means to say he has to still circumcise himself. So on that, we don't say hoyel. But over there, he merely needs to then have to order guests to arrive, guests to then come for a snack. And therefore, we will say hoyel according to Rabba. So it's not a kasha. Ella de Rav Chizda, de Rav Chizda kasha. But according to Rav Chizda, it is a difficulty. Why? Because Amrei, they said ki les le Rav Chizda hoyel lekul. I'm sorry. Before the answer. So let's explain the question. But on Rav Chizda is a kasha, because if over there, in the case where you bake on Yantif for Chol, even there, when it's already not mechusar ma'isa, because you can just merely ask your neighbor to join you for a snack, and then it will be then a valid type of baking, and still Rav Chizda does not say hoyel. So then kol shekain over here, when it's mechusar ma'isa, he didn't yet give a circumcision to himself, we will not say hoyel. Amrei, they answered, ki lesle le Rav Chizda hoyel lekula. L'chumra islay. When does Rav Chizda not say hoyel lekula? And therefore, in the case of baking from Yantif to Chol, he does not say hoyel, because that would be a kula. But over here, when it's a chumra, to then make it so that it passes the carbon, then we would say hoyel. He says it l'chumra. Omar le mar zuterbred Rav Mari le Ravino Ketani, that Bryce that we quoted on Men Samech Aleph on Beis, that taught hoyil ve'orla poiseles ve'tuma poiseles, since that the orla is poisel and the tuma is poisel. The Gemara the Bryce made an analogy. Ma tuma loy osa ba miktas tuma kikola tuma. Just as by tuma, we don't make miktas tuma like olive tuma. Af orla loy osa miktas orla kikol orla. We do the same thing and say it's true also when it comes to orla. That we don't say miktas orla kikula orla. So the Gemara now wants to explain this. Hi tuma hechidami. This tuma that we're saying that we don't say miktas tuma kikola tuma. In what way are we talking about? What are we speaking? Ilema betumas gavri. We're talking about in terms of the individuals who are tamei, and therefore we say when it comes to miktas gavri, some of the people are tamei, some of the people are tahor. It's not poisil, right? So then my umay loima also ba miktas tuma kikol tuma. The ika arba v'chamisha gavri tmein v'arba v'chamisha gavri taharin, because only some of the people are tamei, but the rest of are tahor, and it's not poisil. Lo pasli lihu tmein the taharin. So then gabe orla, let's say the same thing. Nami holoi pasli desnan. After all, the Mishnah puts the two together and states lemulin ularelim kosher. Both lemulin and arelim, those who are circumcised and not circumcised, are kosher. Maishna tuma de pshitale, or maishna orla de pmsafkele. The Gemara is asking, but the Mishnah stated that when it comes to those who are tamei, if it's only mixas tamei, then it's kosher. Or it's only when he is going to then bring the carbon for all people, he's shechting for all who are tamei, is it possible? So then say the same thing, the same way that we know that from the Mishnah, we should say the same thing when it comes to orla. If the mixas arelim and mixas mulin, those who are that have a bris milah, are circumcised, that it's kosher, that doesn't poisil the carbon, and it's only when it's kuloi, arelim is in poisil. So then why are we in suffix? It should say the same thing. Elo, says the Gemara, must be betuma kosher. We're not talking about tuma gavri like we thought of people, but rather the tuma, that the analogy we're making with arelim is talking about the tuma of bosar. Umay loy osa ba mikzas tuma kikola tuma. Then what does it meant when it said in the Brisa that we don't make mikzas kula kikola tuma? The ilu itame chad me'aveiro evarim hai the itame sarfinanle v'idachachlinanle. It means to say that if only part, and let's say one of the evarim became tame, then it will not affect the other evarim. That eva that became tame, your saref, the rest of them we will eat. And therefore, we'll use it as a binyan av in regards to orla too. and say that miktsas orla would be permissible, only kula orla would be problematic and be poisil. Gemara asks, "B'mayu kimta?" In what way are we establishing it? B'tumas bosar. You're establishing it by tumas bosar. Then if that's the case, ask the Gemara, then you have to be consistent. Ema seifa. What are you going to say about the seifa? Danin dove she'en noiheg kikol hazvachim midove she'en noiheg b'kol hazvachim. Then Brisa went on to say that we will deduce all those cases of eino noiheg b'kol hazvachim, namely arelim orla, from davar that's eino noiheg b'kol hazvachim, namely tuma. Ve'al yoichiach, and the Brisa said, and do not prove against this with zman shenoig b'kol hazvachim, which is noig for all zvachim. So my tuma, what tuma are we talking about? E name a tumas bosar, as you wanted to say before in the Reisha for the safe as well. Then on my eino noig b'kol hazvachim. Why is that not noig b'kol hazvachim? Tuma is yes noig b'kol hazvachim. Elo pshita b'tumas gavri. Rather, we must say that it is talking about tumas gavri, and therefore when it says tumas gavri, umay eino noig b'kol hazvachim. What does it mean? Eino noig b'kol hazvachim. The ilu b'kol zvachim aro v'tamim mishalchin karbonosein. When it comes to the rest of the zvachim, other karbonos, there's an aril and tmeim. Then we say they could go ahead and send a shaliach to perform the carbon on their behalf. However, v'ilu b'pesach aro v'tamim ein mishalchin paschein. When it comes to carbon pesach, both an aril and a tamei cannot go ahead and send a shaliach, since the carbon pesach's main purpose is to be eaten, and an arl and a tummy cannot eat the carbon pesach. They cannot send the shaliach. So that's the distinction that the Brisa is making. So it comes out, asks the Gemara something very strange. Reisha betumas bosar, v'seiva betumas gavri. It comes out that the Reisha is talking about one thing, and the Seifa of the Brisa is talking about something else. The Reisha is talking about tumas bosar, and the Seifa is talking about tumas gavri. That's not consistent, l'chara. Omar lei. It's not shver, because shem tumas kaparich. We're using the shem of tuma altogether, and therefore whether it's tuma for this or tuma like that, whether it's tumas basa or tumas gavri, it's still considered the category of tuma, and therefore it's consistent. V'bois ema, or alternatively you can answer seifa nami b'tumas basa. They're both talking about tumas basa, both the reish and the seifa. We said that can't be. The Gemara answers. Umay eino noi b'kol hazvachim. So what did it mean when it says it's not noi b'kol hazvachim? There we had a problem, because the chartumas basar was noi b'kol hazvachim. The Gemara says the ilu b'kol hazvachim ben shenitma chaylev ubasar kayim. When it comes to all other zvachim, all the other karbonos, whether there's the chaylev is nitma and the basar is kayim, or ben shenitma basar v'chaylev kayim, or the opposite, that the basar is nitma and the chaylev is kayim, zorek as adam. Such a carbon is value can be zorek the dam. The ilu Pesach, but Pesach is different. The ilu Pesach nitma chaylev basar kayim zarek as adam nitma basar v'chaylev kayim eino zarek as adam. When it comes to carbon Pesach, there you must have the meat that's kayim, and therefore, if the meat is kayim and the chaylev is nitma, so then you can be zarek the dam. However, if there's not a kazai, it's a basar that's kayim, and therefore it's nitma, even if the chaylev is kayim, you cannot be zarek the dam. The Gemara asked him, "My okimta, how can we? And with what way are we establishing this? Betumas bosar. We're talking about betumas bosar. So the Gemara asks, "Ema seifa." The seifa of the Brisa says, "Danin davish lo hutar michloloi midavish lo hutar michlolo." We deduce that which is not hutar michlolo. The hainu. We're talking about an orel. He can never go ahead and bring a carbon Pesach. So we deduce from there, from something that, from a davar loy hutar michlolo, the hainu zman. Zman, if it's outside, you have a machshav for outside to eat the carbon, outside the proper zman, is not going to be valid. V'al tochiach tuma shareit hutar michlolo, and do not bring tuma as a way of dispelling this, because tuma is different. Tuma is hutar michlolo. That itself has an exception that we do indeed matir. B'mai, in which way is that so, that the tuma is matir? Ilema betumas basar heichi hutra, on top of samach beis amud beis. If you're going to say that tumas basar, then how is that going to then become mutter? Ela pshita betumas gavri. We must be talking about tumas gavri in order to be matir. I v'heichi hutra mechlala. In which way is it going to be mutter? B'tzibur. We say, when it comes to that which is tuma is hutra b'tzibur. That's what we're talking about. Reisha asked the Gemara, betumas basar seima betumas gavri. Again, it's going to be inconsistent. The Reisha is talking about tumas basar, and the Sefer is talking about tumas gavri. The Gemara answers in the same answer that it said before. Shem tuma keparich. It's all the same category of tuma. One is tumas basar, one is tumas gavri. The boys ema, or alternatively can learn kula betumas basar. Both the Reisha as well as the Sefer is talking about tumas basar. The heichad hutra, we said if that's the case, how's a case of hutra basar? The Gemara answers now, betumas pesach. When it comes to korban pesach, let's start with other korbanos. All other korbanos, although it's hutra tuma hutra b'tzibur, they can bring the carbon, but you cannot eat it. But when it comes to korban pesach, it's different. By korban pesach, betumas pesach, you could eat it, since the whole purpose of korban pesach is to eat it. So then when we say that tumas hutra b'tzibur, not only is it mutter to bring up the korban pesach, but it will also be mutter for those who are tamei to eat the korban pesach. This non, it states in the Mishnah, Pesach haba betuma, nechal betuma. A korban pesach that's brought betuma can also be eaten betuma, unlike other korbanos. Shaloi ba mitchilasa elulachi, because the purpose of a korban pesach, unlike the shar korbanos, which the purpose of the shar korbanos is to do the avoid of the korban, but it doesn't have to be eaten, whereas korban pesach, the ikar is ultimately to be eaten, and therefore tuma hutra b'tzibur, even in terms of the achila of the korban.